Welcome back to the channel. This will be my team selection for Blank Gameweek 29. I've got 2 free transfers available as well as the free hit to navigate this blank, and there are many doubles and blanks later in the season that we also need to think about, and that's where my long-term transfer plans will kick in. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. How are you tackling this Blank Gameweek right in front of us? Are you using a chip or perhaps using free transfers? Maybe some of you watching might be taking a hit or two, and all of your questions will be answered in Saturday's deadline stream. Be sure not to miss it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell to miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. You can see my FPL challenge team on screen. There is also a league code in the description for that as well. And I've got Sels, Milenkovic, Aid-Nouri, Bruno Fernandes, Foden, Chris Wood, and Erling Haaland as my captain right now. But there could be a few modifications, and I'll also discuss my FPL challenge squad during that stream on Saturday. But the main focus is on FPL in today's podcast. I'll discuss my plans to optimize my Gameweek 29 squad, as well as the long term, review Gameweek 28, and provide all the information you need for the upcoming deadline. The same pattern I've encountered all season repeated itself in Gameweek 28, where the Saturday looked very bleak and a red arrow was on the cards, and by the end of the game week, things looked slightly better. Matt Sells in the early kickoff kept the clean sheet against Manchester City, the reigning champions, and that's now back-to-back clean sheets against the 2 best sides from last season, which includes Arsenal, back in Gameweek 27, and that's 12 for the season now, and I think Matt Sells has a great chance of winning the Golden Glove, and Nottingham Forest are one of the only sides worth doubling up on defensively until Gameweek 38. As for my defenders, it wasn't great, to be quite honest with you. Levi Cole was the only one to produce a return. He kept a clean sheet in a narrow victory over Leicester City, whilst Trent conceded to the worst team in the division, with Southampton taking the lead through small bone after Van Dijk and Alisson had a grave miscommunication to say the least, and Trent picked up an injury against Paris Saint-Germain in that 1-0 defeat in the Champions League as Liverpool crashed out on penalties, and I think he won't feature this weekend against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup final. But once we get conclusive updates about Trent, I'll provide them on this channel so you're well informed and we can decide what to do with him, primarily in Gameweek 30, but if he is available by that stage, he could be a long-term hold, in my opinion. As for Mykolenko, I benched him last week. He got an assist against Brentford and a bonus point, but recently when I start him, he hasn't really been doing the business, so he has been quite frustrating for me, and his returns have been fairly difficult to predict. But Everton haven't shown the same defensive resilience as they did under Sean Dyche. They are showing much better creativity and attacking threat, but that comes at the expense of their clean sheets, and that makes Jordan Pickford in goal, Mykolenko, and all these Everton defenders less viable than they were a couple of months ago. But I don't think they're terrible. I still think Mykolenko could be a nice 4th or 5th defender, but he's not someone I'd like to start week in, week out. With the midfield though, I have to say it was also very underwhelming. Mohamed Salah was the only one to get a double-digit haul. Cliver got an assist in that 2-2 draw against Tottenham, and the rest blanked. Brian Mbeumo, Palmer, and Semenyo, once again, when I start him, he gets a booking and gets 1 point overall. And to be fair, last week I benched him, but guess what? Isak missed out due to injury. Semenyo comes on and disappoints me once again, stinks up the gaff, and that's been pretty much the same pattern all season with him. But Salah, at least I captained the right player in this regard. I think this swing between Palmer and Salah could be seen as very harsh, but there is also a massive gap in FPL points, in stats, in the quality of both Chelsea and Liverpool, despite the fact that Liverpool did struggle a little bit more than we expected against Southampton. But I have to say, I don't really blame people for going for Palmer, not just in Gameweek 28, but also facing Southampton in Gameweek 27. I just think Salah is definitively the best captain right now. That could change though, with him blanking in 29, and also from Gameweek 30 onwards, you could maybe point towards other captains like Haaland in 30 against Leicester at home, Isak for the double in Gameweek 32. So there will be occasions now where we can go against Salah, but unfortunately the other options might be very template, like the Isak one I just mentioned. Now with the forward line, it was also very poor, with both Isak and Chris Wood blanking, so essentially only Salah, Cliver, Colwill and Matt Sells returned for me, which was very, very surprising to say the least. And even on my bench, 0 points across Robinson, Valdimarsson and the 2 injured players and suspended players in Veltman and Cunha. So maybe it's not too surprising I got 0 points, but Robinson has been great for most of the season, and in recent weeks he has faltered, and Fulham have some fairly difficult fixtures, so moving Robinson to Munoz in Gameweek 30 looks like a great transfer right now based on form and the way both teams are going. Crystal Palace are showing a lot of consistency right now, and Munoz has so many different avenues to points. He has the assists like Robinson, maybe not to the same level to be fair, but he's also got the goals, which makes up for it. So Robinson is on the chopping block, but there are bigger priorities heading into Blank Gameweek 29. In terms of my rank though, surprisingly, I got a small green arrow, but that's because the rank I'm at isn't too great to be fair. So around 2,000 places I went up. I'll take it. It's better than nothing considering I only had 4 players return for me this week and only one of them delivered big. And in that case, everyone captain Salah it seems, so it's not going to be a massive rank rise there. 61 points in back-to-back weeks. It's not too shabby, but I'm still looking for better. Matt Sells was the difference maker in my opinion because his relatively low effective ownership and the clean sheet and bonus point is what guaranteed me that green arrow. I believe according to live.fpl.net, when it says you've got a green arrow by this amount of points, it said 0. So I pretty much absolutely shaded it with some fortune, which I haven't had too often this season. But that was my Gameweek 28 review, and I would rather forget it. It was a pretty forgetful week in the end, despite getting the captaincy right. With the prices, we have seen a lot of transfer activity recently. So the likes of Sells went up in price 2 days ago, but then you got Palmer who went down in price on that same night. And just now, Mateus Cunha has gone down to 6.9 million. So my squad value has gone down to 104.7 million overall when you combine the money in the bank and my current 15-man squad and their value that I've built up throughout the entire season. But apart from that, it's as you were really. The likes of Cliver in the last couple of weeks have gone up quite significantly in price. Even Salah and Trent have gone up in price in the last week or two, but we could see a price fall in the coming weeks with the blank in 29 and also with Trent's injury situation, and Alexander Isak was another player who has seen a price change in the last couple of days, and he actually went down in price to 9.4 million. But let's now move on to my transfer plans, and they're quite extensive because they are not locked in, and keeping Cole Palmer versus buying Haaland is a big dilemma for me. It does mean taking a -4 hit in most cases to go for Erling Haaland if I also want a full starting 11, but it is possible for me to actually buy Haaland with 2 free transfers and buy the likes of Wanyeri, which I'll talk about very soon. But my top Trent replacement long-term would be Gabriel. It's another premium defender. I still think Arsenal have the best defence in the league, but their focus will be on the Champions League, especially in early April. They've got a really tough ask against Real Madrid, but if they were to go through that, which is very unlikely, then I think Arsenal might prioritise that competition and sometimes rotate in the Premier League instead. And we did see a lot of rotation yesterday with Arsenal having that comfortable advantage in the second leg versus PSV Eindhoven. But I think with Trent, we have to monitor that situation. If it's not too shabby and he's available by Gameweek 30, then I'd be quite keen on keeping him for the long term despite his hefty price tag of 7.5 million. But Gabriel is the defender I'd love to have in my FPL setup once again. The returns haven't been great from Arsenal recently, not many set-piece goals. Gabriel isn't getting many returns in general, and you're relying on the clean sheets there for the Gunners. But some of the fixtures coming up I think are fairly decent from a defensive perspective, and with Saka coming back in the next couple of weeks, that will be a massive boost to Arsenal. Martinelli has also returned, so if that is the case, then Arsenal would just be missing Tomiyasu for the rest of the season, Gabriel Jesus and Kai Havertz, and unless they get any more injuries during the international break, God forbid, it looks like a fairly decent house there, but the squad is still very small and there are some clear deficiencies with the Gunners. But moving on to other transfer targets that might be more realistic, that includes Veltman to Nuri. This is a no-brainer, you could say, with a great 29 fixture against Southampton away, whilst Veltman plays Man City away, and he's red flagged. He might not even be available for this blank game week, but that is a good upgrade. As bad as Wolves can be defensively, and as much of a troll that Nuri can be, he's got the goals and assist potential, and Wolves have been slightly better defensively since Vitor Pereira has been appointed. But he's not the only defender I'm looking at. The same goes for Gabriel, because Nico Williams could be my standout replacement for Veltman, because that gives me enough money to have a full starting 11, buy Erling Haaland, and then get a competent replacement for Cole Palmer, who isn't just a 4.3 million bench fodder option that I'd be forced to start in Gameweek 29. But Milenkovic might be my preference there, but Williams is even cheaper. And Cole Palmer to Wanyeri could be yet another move I'm looking at, but that would only happen to prioritise and fund Erling Haaland. Otherwise, I'd want to keep Cole Palmer. As bad as he's been, 9 blanks in a row in terms of no goals scored across all competitions. He's been very frustrating in Fantasy Premier League, and those that sold him several weeks ago will be laughing right now, but things can change so quickly, and he's got some decent fixtures from an attacking perspective, like Tottenham Hotspur at home in Game Week 30. He has a great record against them, and it wouldn't surprise me if he was one of the standout captains in that particular week. But focusing on the here and now, it's not an easy game against Arsenal in Blank Gameweek 29, so it's a decent opportunity to sell Palmer and go to Erling Haaland, who faces Brighton at home, who have been in form, but you'd still back Man City to score some goals there. And then it's Leicester at home for the Citizens, and they've got some fairly decent fixtures to round off the season. I also think Chelsea's fixtures overall are quite good, but not this week, so I can understand that shifting the template from Palmer to Erling Haaland. I'm considering it myself, and despite the fact that I'm leaning towards it right now, it is not locked in, and I might end up keeping Cole Palmer and focusing my transfers elsewhere. But in terms of budget midfielders, I think Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, if you've got the funds, and Nwaneri will be the standouts with a decent fixture, so to speak, in Blank Gameweek 29, especially in the case of Nottingham Forest, and then also some good long-term fixtures, great value, and Nwaneri only costs 4.7 million. Now, in terms of the forward transfers I'm looking at, the main one would be Erling Haaland. He's the clear standout in terms of those I don't own, but the likes of Matheus Cunha would have been perfect for Blank Gameweek 29. He might even have been the best captaincy option across all players available, but now he is suspended for the next couple of matches. Jean-Philippe Mateta, who was definitely on radar for me from Game Week 30 onwards, I might have to delay that a little bit longer, but he could be available just in time for double Game Week 32. And I could see myself switching strikers quite often in the next couple of weeks. But if I buy Haaland now, I'm not going to sell him in Game Week 30 when he faces Leicester at home. He might even be better than Salah that week for the captaincy, despite Liverpool having a home game against Everton on that occasion. But the other forward I'm looking at, which is more attainable, is Visser. And that might seem very strange because Brentford have terrible fixtures for the next couple of weeks. In fact, in the FDR, they're near the bottom because they've got some very tough propositions like Newcastle away, for example, coming very soon. And even Bournemouth away isn't particularly easy. But Visser has a great record against them. They won the reverse fixture, and that's 3 goals and 1 assist in the last 2 games against Bournemouth with back-to-back double-digit hauls. So I think Visser might be slightly underrated this week, but I'm also looking at Marmoush, especially as a Man City coverage for Erling Haaland. I'm also quite keen on Foden, but I don't think that quite works for me and my setup. And there's also a few others like Strand Larsen, just primarily targeting the fixtures right in front of you. And Wolves are top of the fixture difficulty rating until Game Week 34. And others would include the likes of Evanilson. I'd be very keen on that, but I've got Semenyo and Cliver already. So tripling up on Bournemouth offensively does seem a bit overkill. Otherwise, I think Evanilson will be top of my forward replacements for Matheus Cunha. And I do like that differential over the next couple of weeks. Maybe I'll still go through with it, buy the Brazilian, and then sell Semenyo in Game Week 30 or 31. That's something else I could definitely weigh up. But Visser is probably more likely for me in terms of my structure. It means a Brentford offensive double up and also a Bournemouth one in that clash between them in Blank Gameweek 29. But hold up, there is still one more transfer that could be made as a 1-week punt, and that's Salah to a Bruno Fernandes or Phil Foden. In terms of the way fixtures work and my psychology going into Game Week 30 as well, I think it makes more sense to go for Bruno Fernandes because I want to go back to Salah without a shadow of a doubt. But if I went for Foden this week, I just think going from him to Salah, whilst it still would be an upgrade, it's not ideal because Foden would play Leicester at home in Game Week 30, whilst Bruno Fernandes has terrible fixtures on paper for the next couple of weeks. It's just this week for the blank where he faces Leicester away and he can be captained. So that could make a lot of sense for me where I make this sort of switch, provided I've still got the funds available to buy Salah back. And if it's the same case for you, I'd highly recommend it as a 1-week punt. The downsides to this are that you lose a lot of team value and player value built up in Mohamed Salah, but as long as you can buy him back, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. If you aren't able to without taking a hit, then I definitely wouldn't be going for this sort of thing. Just keep Salah on your bench. The same goes for the likes of Isak, Munoz, and these long-term assets, not just for Game Week 30, but also until the end of the season. So with all of that in mind, this is how my team would line up for Blank Gameweek 29, and there are no changes in goal, of course. It speaks for itself. I think Matt Sells is the best goalkeeper this week, and he has been for the last couple, despite facing Arsenal and Manchester City. He still churned out those clean sheets, and away from home here, it might be slightly more difficult than we'd expect, but I think Matt Sells and Nottingham Forest have the best chance of keeping a clean sheet. I'll show the official odds in my deadline stream on Saturday, along with many other graphics like the top 10 captains. With my defensive line, It does mean a back four this week, and I'm not particularly pleased about all of them, except Nico Williams, who could be one of my transfers in, as shown you in the transfer plan section. He's got an appealing fixture, and this defensive double up could work fairly well. If I had the money in the bank though, whilst also affording other moves, then I could just buy Aït-Nouri instead and diversify my defence a little bit. But because of the likes of Cunha being suspended and making things even more difficult for Gameweek 29, it means starting Colwill away to Arsenal. And if I go for the free hit, for example, yes, I don't gain any players numerically, but in terms of quality, I would definitely be able to improve certain positions and go for a back three of Milenkovic, Aït-Nouri and Gabriel, for example, and that looks much stronger than what I have on paper. But it's also not a massive difference, I'd say, but maybe I'm trying to reassure myself by saying that. Then I've got Mykolenko at home to West Ham. I'm not that infused or optimistic about a clean sheet here, to be quite honest with you, but he did keep one in the reverse fixture. Circumstances were different though, and both teams had different managers, so that definitely changes things. And Robinson is at home to Tottenham. Last season, these two teams met in Blank Gameweek 29, the infamous one, which was so low scoring, and Fulham won 3-0, and that's where the likes of Robinson could come in clutch this week. But I have to say, his form and Fulham's haven't been that reassuring, and I do think they've been fairly inconsistent despite a massive result in the FA Cup, beating Manchester United on penalties. With the midfield, it looks slightly better, but it's still not great. Wanyeri could be my transfer in, but I'm selling Cole Palmer, who is still the best of the lot in terms of those available for Blank Gameweek 29 as an overall FPL asset, but he has been off it recently. I think he had an illness, as described by Enzo Maresca, but that should be behind him heading into the Emirates against Arsenal. But going for Wanyeri is definitely risky. Even though it means a massive upgrade up front, it's still something I'm not completely sold on. I do rate the 17-year-old, he's got a lot of potential, and he got a full rest against PSV Eindhoven, but I'd still be slightly careful about this sort of move because it could backfire massively, and this might be the wrong time to sell Cole Palmer, despite the fact that Arsenal are still one of the best teams in the Premier League. Mbuma's a fairly boring pick, you could say, with very high ownership. He's facing Bournemouth away, and I've got two Cherries midfielders. The one I'm really hoping does deliver for me, apart from Wanyeri should I bring him in, would be Semenyo with the low ownership, and I think it's about time he delivers. He's been very inconsistent all season, and sometimes he thrives against the tougher opponents or the biggest clubs on paper, but Cliver has been a great signing for me. He just offers the consistency at that price point. I'm not going to be unrealistic with my expectations and just expect these budget midfielders to return every single week like Palmer did last season, but I just think in the case of Semenyo, he kind of defies logic, and when he's got an easy game, he can flatter to deceive, and then against the best teams in the country, for example, or those big names like Man United, he's going to get a massive return. I think that might not be the best example, but Man City back in Gameweek 9, when they were still in good form at that particular occasion, that was one of the biggest shocks to the system, and it goes to show that the Premier League and FPL can be completely unpredictable at times. With the forward line though, this is the best front two you can build for Blank Gameweek 29, Chris Wood and Erling Haaland. It will be very template, especially for free hitters, I completely get it, and the differentials can be found in the midfield with Jarrod Bowen, Bruno Fernandes and Phil Foden. All of them have been highlighted in my best wildcard and free hit team videos, so be sure to check them out to see how you can gain an advantage over your mini-league rivals and those near the standings in terms of the ranks, so you can push up in terms of overall leaderboards. But I do like this front two, and I do think if I can build this, it'd be very strong for Blank Gameweek 29. The only downside is selling Cole Palmer and taking a -4 hit in the process. As for my bench, I've got the likes of Valdimarsson, Trent, Salah and Isak. They all blank essentially. Valdimarsson does technically feature, but Flecken will be between the sticks, so I'd expect another 0-pointer from my bench for the second consecutive week. It's very rare that I say that, and hopefully I don't get too many bench points from now until the end of the season. With the captaincy, it's slightly different to the kind of usual Mohamed Salah, no-brainer pick, and let's just choose a different vice-captain every single week. I'm going for Erling Haaland here. Should I bring him in? And Chris Wood is the vice. But what about if I keep Cole Palmer? What would be my captaincy plan there? I think I'd captain Chris Wood and then vice-captain a sort of differential, you could say, like Cliver. His overall ownership doesn't suggest that, but in terms of the armband, I don't think many people will be considering him as one of the captaincy options. But for me, he is definitely under consideration, and you might also want to consider a Nottingham Forest midfielder like Alanga, Gibbs-White or Hudson-Odoi. Jarrod Bowen is decent, but I think the likes of Foden and Bruno Fernandes could rival Erling Haaland for the captaincy this week. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And before I show you fpl.team and Gameweek30, these are the expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub. So Matt Sells in goal only has 3.8, only 0.1 higher than it was against Man City last week. A back four of Williams, Colwill, Mikalenko and Robinson, all of them under 4 expected points. And in the case of Colwill, it's a dreadful one on paper, but it is to be expected. And he has been a very good FPL asset for me in the last 2 game weeks, but I've been saying this for quite some time. I think with all these Chelsea defenders, or if you go for Jorgensen in goal, that's another one, you only want them for those fixtures against Southampton and Leicester. Otherwise, you can bin them very easily, and I don't expect them to offer great value until the end of the campaign. Nwaneri has a fairly decent expected points figure of 4. Mbeumo is always over 5 essentially, and Cliver and Semenyo is interesting because Fantasy Football Hub and other algorithms do favour Semenyo, but who gets the actual points? It tends to be Cliver, and I wouldn't mind if Semenyo outscores him this week, provided both of them can do something. That would be great. And the one I really want to do well, of course, is the Ghanaian with the low ownership. He's a good player, of course, with a lot of potential, and I do think he can do very well against some of the opponents coming up. Chris Wood and Haaland are amongst the highest in terms of expected points in my squad. The Norwegian striker is comfortably top. Then you've got the likes of Mbeumo in second, Semenyo and Chris Wood in joint third. I don't necessarily agree with that. That's why Chris Wood is my vice captain, but I honestly wouldn't mind if some of my lower owned players do deliver for me, and in this case it would be Williams, Semenyo, Nwaneri. Those are the ones that could be the kind of rank risers, the ones who secure a green arrow for me. But going without Palmer, taking a -4 hit, these are all big risks, of course, and there are still other assets I haven't even covered, like Wolves ones against Southampton, Strand Larsen up front, Manetzi, 8 Nuri. You can't have them all, but I think the 2 biggest misses are Bruno Fernandes and Phil Foden. I have to strongly emphasize that these transfers aren't locked in. I showed all the different permutations and possibilities in my transfer plan section, and I might not get Erling Haaland in the end, but it does look really strong for Blank Gameweek 29 and Gameweek 30. I don't like going without Cole Palmer against Tottenham at home. That's the fixture that I really back him to do well in, but my squad will look something like this, with Sells in goal against Man United at home, and a defensive double up there with Nico Williams. Levi Colwill at home to Tottenham, it doesn't look great, but my alternatives are Robinson away to Arsenal and Mikalenko away to Liverpool. Perhaps I go for Robinson here, or I just buy Daniel Munoz. That is the most likely transfer I would make, and with only 0.1 million in the bank, it would have to be Robinson making way, but by buying Erling Haaland, it means I'd be 0.1 million off from this sort of move. So that's where the potential issues in future game weeks do arise, and maybe I take a -4 hit in Gameweek 30, add another Crystal Palace or Newcastle player in preparation for double Gameweek 32 to fund this sort of move. But that's where keeping Palmer and not buying Erling Haaland and instead going for Evanilson, Visser, or another forward I've mentioned across all my videos this week, that could be the best long-term moves for my team and my situation, and it will vary for everybody watching depending on money in the bank and also the amount of transfers you have at your disposal. But the midfield has Mbeumo, Salah, Cliver and Semenyo, all with good fixtures, even Mbeumo to a certain degree against Newcastle away. Isak, Chris Wood and Haaland up front is very strong, but the defensive line is slightly weak, especially if Trent is out. And to be fair, if he is unavailable for Gameweek 30 or 31, I just sell him to Daniel Munoz, and then with those extra funds, I can make upgrades elsewhere. So there's a lot to think about, but either way, I don't think my defense looks particularly great by getting Haaland in 29 and with these possible transfers. But Munoz is definitely someone I want to bring in for Gameweek 30. There's no denying that, and I think I'll have it done one way or the other. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What are your transfer plans this week and your chip strategies? Are you buying Daniel Munoz in Gameweek 30 if you haven't done so already? Or are you looking at different transfers to prepare for double Gameweek 32 and beyond? And there we have it. Another team selection video for FPL has been chalked off, this time out of Blank Gameweek 29, the first blank of the season. I'm very much looking forward to it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below as always. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. There's a lot of videos and live streams headed your way over the next couple of weeks. Despite the fact there is an international break, there is still going to be a lot of content, especially for FPL. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, Spotify, and the FPL Challenge League can also be found in the description. I wish you all the best of luck for Blank Gameweek 29 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you tomorrow for that deadline stream.